Howdy guys, welcome to my multi-step guide on how to both cement and completely ruin a franchise within the span of 5 years. Failure guaranteed. How do I turn this thing off? Step 1, accidentally created the world's 4th best-selling video game of all time as of December 2017. Step 2, completely abandon your core fans because you're pursuing a new, more valuable audience, old people. Step 3, E3's coming up, and now that everyone hates you, you really want to get someone who connects with and understands your community. So you grab your nearest yoga instructor, give her a pantsuit, and bam, marketing. Step 4, at that same E3, announce a pretty good sequel to that best-selling game as of December 2017. Smells like success. Not the right direction we want to go in. Which leads us directly to step 5. You remember that 35th best-selling game of all time? Yeah, that one? Well, why don't you make a sequel to that too? Ah, right direction. And finally, step 6. End it. Damn it, I knew I did something wrong. Wii Sports was a massive success for Nintendo. Its simplistic, easy-to-use motion controls really appealed to the casual gaming demographic, full of people that had really never played video games before, with Wii Sports being many people's first introduction into gaming. Its success, alongside the success of its sister game Wii Play, garnered more games in the Wii series to be made, like Wii Fit. But while Wii Fit was another massive success in the Wii series, Nintendo really wanted to go back to the original Wii Sports with a sequel. Thus, Wii Sports Resort was born. But before I get to that, I'd like to tell you a tale of when a video game company completely switched their target demographic, abandoning their fans in the process. Alright, let's imagine you're a Nintendo fan in the year 2005. The Nintendo DS had been out for a bit, and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was looming over the horizon, but most importantly, Nintendo's next-generation home console, the then-named Revolution, which was going to get a lot more information given that year. A lot of pressure was being put on this new console, as GameCube sales were far lower than expected. The DS was doing well, but Nintendo needed a successful home console ASAP. Well, fast forward to E3 2005, where then Nintendo President Satoru Iwata gave a few new details about the system, such as its backwards compatibility with GameCube games, the Virtual Console service, and something a few people may have glossed over.
We will attract casual gamers better than anyone using consumer-friendly content, control, and interface.
Uh-oh.
By the time E3 2006 came around, it was clear that Nintendo were trying to do something completely different than what they had done before. They were going to try and corner the casual market, which kind of miffed their core audience. Would this mean that Nintendo would focus entirely on the casual market? Well, no, but the next few years were quite a weird time to be a Nintendo fan. Let's fast forward again to E3 2008. By this time, Nintendo's first-party library was filled with a variety of games that were very broad in their appeal. You have games like Brain Age, Nintendogs, and Wii Fit, just to name a few. All of these games have one thing in common. They're all easy to understand, pick up and play experiences made to appeal to pretty much everyone, regardless of whether or not you were interested in video games in the first place. Hell, even their E3 presentations, which had been seen by many people as mostly for the core fans, had just become a yearly montage of the slop they were going to shovel down your grandparents' throat that fall. E3 2008 was no different. Starting out the presentation, we have not someone recognizable to many a Nintendo fan like Reggie Fils-Aimé or Satoru Iwata. Nope. Instead, they brought out then Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Cammy Dunaway, to lead the presentation. This is a very symbolic moment in that, at least from the perspective of their fans, they had essentially ghosted them. They then went on to announce various other casual games like Shaun White Snowboarding and Spore Creatures, you know, for the core fans. But finally, there was something to look forward to with the announcement of Wii Sports Resort. This is actually one of the few highlights of the presentation, actually managing to get a few people to clap. I mean, it was followed by one of Nintendo's worst E3 moments in history, but I'll save that for later.
Now that you understand the landscape of what it was like to be a Nintendo fan back in the day, we get to talk about Wii Sports Resort.
Not much is really known about the development of Wii Sports Resort, so consider this a condensed version of the story. Given the immediate success of the original Wii Sports, of course a sequel was always planned. However, they would only go forward with the idea once a new control scheme came around. So the idea sat dormant for quite a bit until the advent of the Wii Motion Plus accessory. This little nugget was made in collaboration with AI Live, an American software company, and added more advanced motion capabilities. More specifically, it added a gyro to the mix, allowing it to capture more complex motions instead of just winging it like with the original Wii Remote. With this new motion technology in hand, they finally went forward on development. Somewhere along the line, it was decided to have the game take place on an island resort, with various resort-themed activities being pitched. Alongside more traditional activities like jet skis and cycling, there were also a few scrap modes. Fishing and a water slide were considered for the game, but never made it in. There was also a minigame based off of the Japanese toy kendama, but it didn't really fit the theme, so it was scrapped. Like I said earlier, it was first revealed at E3 2008, and people were actually pretty pumped considering, it was E3 2008 after all. It was shown off again at the next year's E3 and was finally released on June 25th, 2009 in Japan and July 26, 2009 in North America. Reception was mostly positive, with it going on to sell over 30 million units worldwide, which wasn't nearly as high as the original game sales, but is forgivable as it wasn't bundled with the console at launch. First things first, I'd like to talk about the box art. Here in the land of the free, the only thing that seems to be running free here is the marketing. Ugh. I always hate these box arts that are just screenshots, it's just lazy. But goddamn, look at Europe's offerings. A nice mural of me participating in the activities the game has to offer while still making sense in the game world.
It's so beautiful!
Well, I can certainly say for sure that presentation is off the charts compared to the original game. You start out by doing the skydiving minigame, which acts as a prelude into the main game, introducing you to the surroundings of the island. Then we're finally thrust into the world of Wii Sports Resort. Just like the original, it's a compilation of motion control based minigames where you play as your Mii avatar, but instead of being more conventional sports, each of the games are things that you usually find on a resort. The game takes place on Woohoo Island, an island resort in the middle of knows where. It actually first made an appearance in Wii Fit, where it was the setting of the running minigames. However, the island was beefed up a ton with multiple new landmarks and even a volcano, Mako Woohoo. I think it's a beautiful setting that really brings the theme of an island resort together. The character, and yes, that's what it is, was so popular that it later went on to appear in other Nintendo games like the Mario Kart or Smash Bros. Series. The island hosts multiple activities, whether that be water sports, air sports, or the shit I don't even remotely understand. Now, the controls are magnificent. They were quite honestly hit or miss in the original Wii Sports because the base Wii Remote just did not have advanced enough motion controls to sense anything past a few waggles, but now with the gyro and the Wii Motion Plus, controls are much more accurate than before. As such, sports that would have given me an aneurysm just thinking about being implemented into the original game are not only possible, but also control pretty well. Another improvement made in Wii Sports Resort is in its amount of content. The first game only had 5 sports, while Resort includes a whopping 12. On top of that, each game now has stamps you can collect, which really adds to the replayability of the game. Now, that doesn't mean they sacrifice quality over quantity, quite the contrary, actually. I find almost all of them to be really fun experiences that make it the pinnacle of the entire Wii series.
Not that that's a particularly hard milestone to reach.
But enough of that, let's get into the sports. Swordplay is somewhat derivative of shows like American Gladiator. In the duel mode, you use these Jolly Rancher looking sticks to whack your opponent. Whack them up to knock them off the platform and win. It's a pretty fun game to play in multiplayer, and if you play it in single player, it becomes quite challenging. In Speed Slice mode, you slice fruits in certain directions. Yeah. But then there's my personal favorite mode, Showdown. It's a single-player only collection of levels where you have to defeat a load of enemies. I just find it really satisfying to waggle through a load of enemies while still having some challenge to it. Oh yeah, you can also play in the volcano. That's right, you, Shaun White snowboarding. In wakeboarding, you tilt the Wii Remote to perform tricks off of waves, and you get more points for every time you make a good landing. It's pretty fun, but did you see that seagull? In Frisbee Dog, you throw frisbees for your dog to catch in a targeted area. Throw it further to the center of the area, and you earn more points. I think it's alright, but nothing too special. But Frisbee Golf, now that's a lot more interesting. It's basically golf, but you throw a frisbee instead. I find it to be a lot more fun than Frisbee Dog just because you have a lot more options for frisbees, and it lasts a lot longer. Archery is alright. It's got pretty good controls, and it's pretty relaxing, but like, who the f plays archery? Basketball is shockingly more fun than I thought. You'd think it would be hard to jump and throw the basketball in the same motion, but it works surprisingly well. In 3-point contest, you gotta score as many shots as fast as you can. I'm not very good at it. Pickup game is also pretty fun. You throw the ball to 2 members on your team while trying to dodge the opposing team either blocking or stealing your ball. Every turn, you switch places and try to do the same to the opposing team. I find it especially satisfying to maneuver your way to the hoop and perform a slam dunk. It's also quite a gas in multiplayer where the stakes are much higher. Overall, it's good.
Alright, so what's next?
Yes! It's table tennis! It's pretty much tennis from the original Wii Sports, but table! The sound design is off the charts here, with every hit of the paddle, and even the crowd cheering just being some of the best ear candy I've ever heard. On top of that, it's really fun. I'm not usually a fan of real-life table tennis, so that's very impressive. I can usually find myself playing this sport for hours. But now we approach the first game to be brought back from the original Wii Sports, golf. If you recall, the original controls were quite janky and just kind of winged it when it came to precisely hitting the ball. Well, I am glad to report that those things are fixed tenfold. With the new gyro, it can actually detect how close you are to hitting the ball, so you can actually swing correctly. On top of that, new resort levels are added, which take place on Wedge Island, a smaller island adjacent to Woohoo Island. I'm really happy that they fixed those major issues, as now I can safely say that golf is one of the best sports in the entire game. And directly following that is another game from Wii Sports, bowling.
Alright, the organization here is really starting to piss me off.
Controls aren't too different, probably because they were already pretty good in the original game. Still very fluid and easy to control. If you want, you can even change the throwing style back to the original, just making it slightly more difficult. The training modes from Wii Sports also make their way into this game as well, with 100-pin bowling, where you bowl 100 pins, and spin control, where these annoying block things are added to the lanes. Again, a very nice experience. Now we get into the more obscure sports, which is just kind of a fancy name for sports I didn't give a shit about. In power cruising, you ride a jet ski through rings under a time limit. I think it's fine, with the only thing I have an issue with being the controls. So you hold it like you're controlling a real jet ski, which is fine at first, but playing it for an extended amount of time makes your arms tired pretty quickly. Canoeing is stupid. Alright, maybe it's just because I suck at it, but I find it really difficult to navigate the course. The controls are just weird. You paddle the remote left and right to move, but sometimes you move the Wii remote in one direction only for it to pivot the opposite direction. I just wouldn't recommend it. Cycling's pretty cool. You have to bike ride across a course, whether that be around the island, across the bridge, or along the beach. You move by shaking the Wiimote and nunchuck really fast, while also making sure you retain your stamina. I find it oddly satisfying to just glide your bike. It's a weird thing, but it's still pretty good. And last but not least, we have air sports, a collection of sports that take place where?
Russia.
The skydiving minigame from the beginning is here again, where you have to hold on to different Miis around you, and every time you do it, it takes a picture. I think it works better as just an introduction into the full game, but it's still nice to see here. But now, we get into what might be the best sport in the entire game. Island Flyover. If you remember, this is what came of the scrapped airplane minigame from the original Wii Sports, which was originally seen at E3 2006. However, instead of flying through rings, you're given the ability to take a leisurely excursion aboard an airplane, flying above the entire island. You're free to explore around, where you can see all of the landmarks you came across while playing the other sports, and lets you see how all of them really fit together. It's really relaxing, and is just absolutely beautiful for a Wii game, with Woohoo Island probably being one of the best backdrops to a game ever. Of course, that's not all you do. You can collect eye points, which are placed above landmarks. Collecting enough of them lets you unlock things like night mode and fireworks. You can also do other things like pop balloons, or hell, you can even cut your engines and dive face first into Maka Woohoo if you wanted. The possibilities are pretty much endless here. There's also a dogfight mode where you have to pop your opponent's balloons, which are on the back of their plane. Overall, I really don't think you have to have an exciting sport for it to be interesting. Just having a relaxing game to play for a while is also nice. Overall, Wii Sports Resort is the right way to do a sequel. Improving on a lot of the issues with the original, while also including even more fun minigames, make it quite possibly the best game in the Wii series. On top of unbridled nostalgia I have for the game, I'm very fond of it, maybe even more so than the original Wii Sports. I find it to be more than just a tech demo for the Wii Motion Plus, and can stand on its own as a solid minigame compilation.
You know, I think it was a good call to make a sequel to Wii Sports. Despite Nintendo being in the middle of their dreaded casual era, they still managed to show that some of them could be considered more than just okay. So I solemnly swear that I shall never again call a Wii era Nintendo game just okay.
So obviously, after seeing the success of Wii Sports Resort, they decided to make a sequel to another Wii series game, Wii Play.
Oh my god.
Don't get me wrong, Wii Play was fine. It had some fun minigames and controls that were at least somewhat innovative, but it wasn't nearly as good as Wii Sports was, since it was a lot more simplistic and a lot of the minigames weren't very interesting. Regardless of that, they decided to make a sequel anyway, since it did sell nearly 30 million units. So, how did it come to be?
Who gives a shit?
Well, the origins of this Wii Play sequel begin within Nintendo and many of its subsidiary developers, among the likes of Good Feel Inc., Skip Limited, and various others. They had been asked to develop demos for the Wii Motion Plus accessory. Essentially, they were just making Wii Play, but for the Wii Motion Plus. But wait, isn't that what Wii Sports Resort is? You know, the tech demo title that shows off the advanced motion controls of the Wii Motion Plus? Well, they must have realized this themselves, because it changed from being a tech demo for the Wii Motion Plus to being for the Wii Remote Plus, a completely different product. This is a Wii Remote that had had the Wii Motion Plus technology built inside, so basically the exact same thing, which gave them a reason to make the game. So they announced it on April 12th, 2011, then later released it in North America on June 13th, to very little fanfare. The game has sold roughly around 1.26 million units, which is quite literally over 2,000% less as many as the original game. It makes sense, as you'll soon see, but on top of that, it was just released at a bad time. It was 2011, not only did the 3DS just come out, but the Wii U had just been announced, and there were way more interesting Wii games coming out that year, so most people were probably focused on other things. To help out just a bit, it came bundled with the Wii Remote Plus, similar to the original.
Have you noticed that I haven't said the name of the game yet?
So as I put this disc in my Wii, it will be the very first time that I ever play Wii Play Motion. Wii Play Motion, like Wii Sports Resort, is a motion control-based minigame compilation that utilized the advanced motion controls of the Wii Remote Plus. However, instead of tying all the minigames together with an underlying setting, they all have even less to do with each other than the original game. That's probably due to the fact that most of the games were developed by different people. Okay, I'll be honest, the games themselves aren't too bad, but they're nowhere near as good as Wii Sports Resort's games. There are 12 in total, just like Wii Sports Resort, but in addition to that, there are also even smaller games that you can play on the title screen. Some of them are unlocked by getting medals in all the games, which is the most hilarious thing that I've ever said, but there are also some that are unlocked by default. They're actually pretty fun little things to do while you wait for your panic attack to subside so you can finally get into Wii Play Motion, you p***y. Let's begin with Cone Zone, developed by RZest Corporation, the people behind Yoshi's New Island for the 3DS, and more recently co-developed the all-star 3D platformer, Balan Wonderworld. In Scoop mode, you balance an ice cream cone with the Wii Remote, while more and more scoops are added to the cone. So basically Coney Island for a Mario Party 5, but with motion controls. I think it's alright, but nothing that's gonna make me go, holy shit, is that Cone Zone? In Swirl mode, you twist the same cone, but trying to make a tall and balanced swirl of ice cream. Now that just screams RZest Corporation. Veggie Garden, developed by Goodfeel, the people behind Kirby's Epic Yarn and oh is essentially whack-a-mole, where you have to stop those pesky moles from stealing your veggies, but don't hit the Miis that are basically asking for it. But there's also boss moles that really mean business.
Oh, they mean business.
There's also Recall mode, which is Simon Says but with about 70% more animal beatings. Abuse them in the right order and you win. Next we have Skip Skimmer, also developed by Goodfeel. It's actually a lot more fun than you'd think, controlling a lot like the Frisbee game in Wii Sports Resort, but you skip a rock on the water instead. You got many different rocks with varying shapes and sizes. I love the frog rock. Hell, you even get an in-depth analysis on the position and strength of your throw. It's some extensive stuff. There's also a Score mode where you throw the rocks through rings to score points. Yeah. Now let's get into Pose Me Plus, developed by Skip Limited, who also developed the art style and Chibi Robo series. Wow, so how do they put their developing expertise into this game? Well, remember that one game from Wii Play that was a cut-down version of those demos from E3 2006? Well, there's a sequel. Somehow, they managed to cut the game down even more than before. Instead of the slight challenge of putting Miis in bubbles, you're given this hole-in-the-wall type scenario, and it has to be the easiest thing I've ever seen in the entire Wii series. Don't believe me? On my first try ever, I beat the entire thing in like 2 minutes while only missing once. Just some kind of challenge would be appreciated. Speaking of games brought back from the original, here's Trigger Twist, developed by Probe. Now I know that name must be familiar to all you Real Animals HD for the Xbox 360 fans out there, because they developed that as well. This is essentially the shooting range game from the original, but now it's in 3D. The first level is basically the same as the original shooting range, but the next few levels have you shoot other things like ninjas, and when dinosaurs get involved, it becomes an on-rail shooter. It even has bosses. However, there's just one major problem. In order to move around, you have to point the Wii Remote on the sides of the screen, which means that if there's something you're trying to shoot that's also on the side of the screen will move instead, causing you to miss constantly. But hey, maybe that's just that Probe quality leaking through. Jump Park is another game developed by RZest. You're placed in this bouncy carnival for some reason, and you have to tilt your Mii in order to bounce off the walls and collect enough gems to move on to the next area.
What?
Yeah, I don't get it either. I think it's okay. The controls are a bit weird at first, but when you get used to it, it's okay. But if you think that's basic, then you should see Teeter Targets. Now, this is the only game in the collection to be made by Nintendo themselves, so we should see an increase in quality, right? You know, this reminds me a lot of mobile games I used to play back in the early 2010s, and that is not a compliment. Tilt platforms, bounce balls to break targets, and that's it. I really don't think this has enough substance to excuse the fact that it also really doesn't pack that motion plus power that you'd think it would have. Especially for Nintendo, I'm quite disappointed. However, in contrast, let's talk about what I believe to be the coolest game in the collection, Spooky Search, another RZS game. This game utilizes both the Motion Plus and Wii Remote's built-in speaker. You move the Wii Remote off-screen, either above or behind you, then you scan the area around you looking for ghosts. When you find one, the Wii Remote will make a sound. Then you press a button to grab it, then move it back on screen and drag it into the vacuum. This has to be the best use of the Motion Plus technology in the entire game, utilizing the gyro perfectly. Next, we have Windrunner, developed by Vanpool, which is either a game company or a rideshare service.
You know, I think either one would work.
In this game, you navigate an obstacle course using the wind and your umbrella to push you forward and glide in the air, so you can collect more gems all while wearing rollerblades.
What?
Another fine game with pretty good controls, but the concept alone is enough to give me major whiplash. Also, the Mii voices scare me. You got long jump and time attack modes that are also alright, but not anything I'd play again. Treasure Twirl, developed by Mitchell Corporation, is honestly quite forgettable. You collect treasure underwater, moving down by twirling the Wii Remote, tilting to avoid obstacles while keeping track of your oxygen. I think the multiplayer version is a bit more interesting, where you and your partner have to carry a treasure chest above the surface, allowing for more exciting things to happen. Overall, meh. Next is Ew! Ugh, Flutterfly. This is another skip game where you have to move a leaf around a balloon, while birds that you can never avoid surround you at all times. I hate the controls, they're pretty clunky, and now I just feel sad. But now we move on to the final game, Star Shuttle, developed by Chunsoft of Dragon Quest fame. You have to deliver pieces of a spaceship to a dock while making sure you line up the dots on both the dock and the piece. Now the controls are way wonky at first, where you gotta use the D-pad to move forward and the A and B buttons to move up and down. It's just weird. One thing I like about this game is that as you go through each of the levels, the ship becomes more and more complete until you completely finish it. I think it's a pretty nice game, but as for the entirety of Wii Play Motion, I'm really disappointed. It has more content, improved controls, the game collection is mostly okay, and only a few games could be considered bad, so why? Why do I give this game such a hard time? Well, I think it's just because being a mediocre game really doesn't cut it when you're comparing it to another game like Wii Sports Resort. It's obvious Nintendo didn't care too much about it, and instead of giving Wii Play a proper sequel, they just decided to make another collection of barely connected tech demos made by other people and slap the Wii Play logo on it, which I think is doing a real disservice to the potential Wii Play had.
Okay, I'm talking about Wii Play here, not Homer's Odyssey.
Overall, I think we've learned how to and how not to do a sequel, improve upon the original game while also including new content. Being just mediocre doesn't cut it when we're dealing with something as big as the Wii series. When you do it right, the sales will follow, at least most of the time.
Well, I suppose that's the end of our story. Nintendo excommunicated their own fanbase just so they could sell more copies of Wii Sports and more and convenient plot moment. There's still some of the tape left. I wonder what's on the rest of it. And finally, step 6, end it. By which I mean port it to HD consoles. No.